Welcome to the We Need to Talk with Tony Lindsay podcast. I'm your host, Tony Lindsay. And here on this platform, we try to facilitate the conversations that are usually deemed taboo or just too uncomfortable for most people due to their fear of being judged or even canceled. Now, what's important is this is a safe space where all opinions are welcome. Every perspective and every voice matters. On this platform, we encourage our listeners to think critically, based in logic and reason, and most importantly, the facts. Because when that happens, we all discover that we have far more in common with each other than we thought. So, let's get started. Welcome to the show. My name is Tony Lindsay, and this is We Need to Talk with Tony Lindsay. Now, previously, I discussed the topic of people who I find to be quite brilliant. Some of these people are critical thinkers, and critical thinking is something that I encourage quite often in my videos. Now, there are certain people out there who I believe are very intelligent people, but unfortunately, they sometimes undermine their own messaging by trying to placate certain audiences, whether it be for clicks, for views, for monetary gain, or just for basic acceptance or a pat on the head. And the person that I'm talking about right now is Candace Owens. Now, for a long time, I've actually been a defender of Candace Owens in many regards. Now, we have very different political views in very specific areas. But one thing about Candace Owens is I think she's very intelligent, and I think she knows how to think critically. She's very good at breaking down information and analyzing it, and I think that's very good. She's pretty good at seeing bullshit, I would say, and that's why I think some of her talking points are extremely disingenuous, because I'm actually giving her more credit because I know she's intelligent, and so I know that some of the things that she says that undermine her messaging, they must be intentional, because she's too intelligent for some of the ignorant positions that she takes. Now, while I think she's very politically astute and intelligent, and she's very good, as I said, at breaking down certain things, and I think she's quite insightful, I think that she has a blind spot. I think she has her Achilles heel. Her Achilles heel is the topic of race. And one of the patterns that I've noticed with a lot of people, a lot of Black conservatives, is that they feel that in order to be deemed legitimate on the conservative side of things, or if they're Republicans, they feel that they have to pretty much abandon any sort of attachment to the realities of race. And I understand the desire to not want to make everything about race, and especially as a person who was once a Democrat, who understands how white liberals tend to weaponize race against others so that they can put forward their agenda. I get it. But at the end of the day, when you're a Black person, there's a certain experience that you have in this country that is quite different from anyone else. And to deny the realities of racism is a betrayal, not only of yourself and your community, but it's also a betrayal of your own messaging, because it undermines your credibility. And not just with Black audiences, it actually undermines your credibility with the racist segment of certain demographics that you're trying to appeal to. Now, I'm not saying that conservatives are racist, because I have a lot of conservative views. I'm an independent. I'm an independent thinker. I'm an independent person. Politically, I'm independent completely. But there is an air of racism that appeals to many white conservatives that many of them don't even tend to realize themselves. And the reason why, I believe, is because they have a latent built-up hostility towards the whole racial conversation because of the excessive weaponization of race. And therefore, it becomes a battle of the left versus the right. Oh, you're racist. No, I'm not racist. And everyone is trying to prove they're not racist. And then you got the people on the right who are always being called racist no matter what they say. So they're just like, you know what? Screw it. Forget it. I don't care anymore. I'll be racist. And then they embrace it. So a lot of these positions that they're taking are based in animus, hostility, frustration. And I think it doesn't help when you have Black conservatives who, in order to go along and to get along, to get that support that they may not be getting from the so-called left, because they are critical thinkers, they decide to make certain concessions in their own messaging. They make certain compromises in their talking points that I know you guys are too smart to actually believe. Now, is there racism in the United States? Absolutely. Is our system racist? Yes, it is. We live in what is a caste system in this country. And to deny that, it delegitimizes anything that you really say, because we understand how the country was built and we understand how the systems in this country were built and how they continue to operate to this day. We also understand the wealth disparities, what they're rooted in. We understand all of these things. Now, Democrats tend to play in this arena of victimhood that does not help Black Americans. I agree with that. But at the same time, you have people on the so-called right who try to, I guess, appease their appease themselves, or deal with, maybe it might be guilt, or they just want to kind of ignore the realities and make themselves feel better about these disparities by just denying it. And what makes it easier to deny it is the fact that we have the left who weaponizes race so much. And then you get all these terms like, oh, she's a DEI or he's a DEI hire, which for a lot of folks we know is code for N-word. But at the same time, DEI still tends to be a legitimate talking point, because I can say as a Black person that many of these people on the left who are so they're so aggressive about putting Black people into positions just because of the color of their skin while ignoring qualification, I understand that they're not putting the best of us up front. They're not doing that. And I think that only serves to help further give the impression that Black people are somehow incapable, inept, lazy, looking for handouts. When the truth is, Black people in America just want everybody to stay the hell out of their way. That's all it is. And so now I'm saying all of this because I think that Candace has a habit of undermining her messaging, and she has very good messaging. She's so smart, but she always finds a way to fuck it up. And that usually happens whenever there's something racial that happens, and she immediately jumps on the, oh, well, it's not racism. Oh, stop it. And, stop denying racism. Just stop denying that racism exists. Now, I don't know if this is something rooted in some type of trauma that she's gone through in her life. I don't know if this is just bad faith, deliberate bad faith arguments. But I do know one thing, and I'm leaning more towards some sort of trauma or some sort of sense or feeling of abandonment by her own. And it could be something that happened longer and long ago in her life. And I'm not trying to, like diagnose her or anything like that. But I do specifically remember, like I distinctly remember when she started getting invited to all these Black media platforms like Joe Budden, when the Joe Budden podcast invited her, the Breakfast Club. And it's like I saw this energy in her. I saw this glow in her. Almost like she was, oh, Black media, like they want to receive me, like they want to listen. And I think that's beautiful. I saw her glowing from a feeling of being welcomed or accepted, just invited to speak to her community. And I think, I don't know if you guys remember that there was this it was like a Black summit that was done. I think it was for Revolt or something, when they invited Candace Owens out there, and you had, people on the left, people on the right. I think Tamika Mallory was there, T.I. was there, Candace Owens was there, big what's his name? Michael Render, what's his name? Killer Mike was there. And, the conversation was pretty good for a while. And Candace Owens was killing it. And I was actually loving the dialogue. But then, T.I. kind of went in on her, and the way Candace says it, it's like, he was so nice to her. But then when the cameras came on, it was like he was just looking for viral moments. And what happened was, it's like everyone just kind of turned on her and made her feel really unwelcome and like an outcast when she was speaking a lot of sense. And I think that's something that we have to face whenever we're talking about Black conservatives. They're always deemed these sellouts, these Uncle Toms, and these ridiculous, childish names that try to, validate or invalidate their Blackness based upon a scale that you are actually adopting from white people, because it is white liberal ideology that you're using to determine the validity of these people's Blackness. Why is it that when a Black person has a conservative view or is voting Republican or supports Republicans, you're saying that, they're not Black enough, or you're a Django, you're a slave, you're a sellout? So what does that mean? Does that mean that your gauge of Blackness is based upon how closely you align with Democrats? Because to me, that sounds like you're the slave, because you're determining your Blackness based upon a gauge that isn't even from your own community or your own race. It's based on a political party that's controlled by whites. So now let me go to what I'm talking about on how Candace Owens invalidates her brilliance. And here's one example with the Sonya Massie shooting. Now, I was trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she didn't understand. She didn't know what the full information was. But that lady was murdered. Straight up and down, she was murdered. I mean, they literally tried to cover it up. They tried to say that she shot herself in the head. Like, it's really disturbing when you see the shooting, which I watched. We saw it. She was no threat to them whatsoever. She was not crazy. They tried to, you know what? Let me just play it for you. And I want to give Candace a little bit of grace, but she has to be willing to humble herself and admit that she's wrong. She has to admit that she's wrong. Now, she's going in on Cardi B, and trust me, I ain't got no love for the Cardi B or her image. I don't have any love for that. I hate the way that Democrats like to use these people as some type of, I guess this is supposed to be like some representation of the Black community, where, like, why are you inviting rappers to the White House and comedians, but you're not talking to, the scholars? But anyway, let me play to you guys what I'm talking about. This is from her latest episode. Now, this is after she did her podcast when she was talking about the shooting, and people were clearly outraged because her presentation was one that pretty much, they're saying, oh, you were blaming her. And Candace says, no, I wasn't blaming her. Those weren't my words. But you were kind of blaming her. But let's just listen.
Sorry, I'm choking a little bit.
It's okay.
She said something so disturbing about the Sonya Massie.
Oh, okay. This is Candace Owens playing what Cardi B was saying in like a Spaces thing. So she's going to comment on it.
Case. And it's just like, yo, why you always gotta it up? Why you always gotta it up? Like, why you always gotta take it there? Like, it's like you always gotta take it there. And it's like, why you gotta take it there? Like, for you to sit here and say that it's like, oh, we cannot blame everything on racial, not everything is racial. I know that this is sad, but this is not something racial. There's more white people that killed by the cops, and it's like, girl, shut up. You don't feel one little bit of empathy, one little bit of sympathy of how this woman died. There was no argument, there was no conflict, there was no raised a voice, and she got shot.
So that's a good place to stop before I let her keep speaking, because again, what tends to happen in these circumstances is Black America is routinely taught to just be upset and to be angry and to do exactly what Cardi B is doing. And this is why I always use her as an example, because she has a massive platform and she's saying things. She has no idea what she's talking about. She obviously did not listen to my full show. She did not listen to the full context. And yet she's leading people to believe that I've somehow justified the shooting of Sonya Massie, right? Because if you just listen to what she said, you would go, oh my gosh, Candace is effing ish up again. Candace must have gone on her show and been like, listen, guys, this is not about race. This is totally fine, and just showed no empathy toward the situation. And that is why people would deem her to be a useful idiot. That's why I say that they like to platform people that they suspect don't have enough education
True.
to research things on their own, and will therefore just believe a headline or believe a short clip. And again, will not do any deeper research to see what exactly it is that person said in their full context.
Absolutely.
So I'm just going to give Cardi B a portion of what I said that she definitively did not see, because I saw the same clip, which was edited intentionally, or I should say misedited intentionally, clipped intentionally in a way that tried to make it seem as though I was just out there defending what had happened to Sonya Massie. Here are my actual remarks, which oddly sound suspiciously a lot like what Cardi B was just saying there at the end. Take a listen.
Okay, listen for yourself.
Now, when this first was spoken about, we were told that, I don't know, there was some sort of a threat with the boiling water. Sure, yes, she's acting erratically, and there is a situation in which she could have thrown the boiling water at the police officers, but they were nowhere near her. And then they...
All right, hold on one second. She already started that off wrong about her acting erratically. She wasn't acting erratically. I watched that video. I watched everything. I observed it from the moment she called, from when she made the 911 call, when they called back to confirm that officers were there, when she sat down speaking to them in her living room. No, there was nothing erratic about her behavior. So let's just make that clear.
Shoot her, which to me, given the context of the fact that you knew that this woman was not mentally there, and even if she did throw boiling water...
Okay, why are you saying that this woman was not mentally there? There's no question about her mental capacity. Well, actually, I'm going to show you with another clip, because after the shooting, there was a lot of weird obfuscation, hiding of information for hours after she was shot. And I'm talking about like from 911 dispatchers and even the police. No one knew. Everyone believed that it was a self-inflicted gunshot wound. And then the first thing he asked right after shooting her, when he was on the phone with 911 or dispatch, was, is she 1096 or something? And that was basically asking, did she have mental illness? So that's where this whole talking point of her being mentally unstable came from. It came from the cop who shot her, the cop who murdered her, and then turned his body cam on after he killed her. Let's keep going.
Water at you. I don't see how saying, she said, I will rebuke you, I think she said, in the name of the Lord, and then he says, no, you will not, because I will shoot you. I mean, that is like very extreme, very aggressive. And he then proceeds to, he says, I will shoot you in the face. I mean, that's just like, what are you even talking about? Over a woman with...
Okay. Let's make this clear. Not only did he just say, I'm going to shoot you in the face, he pulled out his gun and he pointed it at her face. When she said, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus, as she was pouring out the water in the sink. When she brought the water over to the sink and he tried to make a snide remark, oh, I'm staying away, you got that hot water. She was like, oh, no, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. In other words, don't even try that. Don't try that BS with me. I'm rebuking you. See, that's the politest way that a Christian would tell you, I rebuke that devil that's in you that's trying to start a problem with me. And Black people know that. Black people know what that meant. But there's nothing about I rebuke you in the name of Jesus that sounds anything remotely near, anything in any way near to a threat of violence. Let's keep going.
Boiling water. In my opinion, he should have simply used his taser if he felt threatened by the steaming water. Or if...
Why would he use his taser when the dude was like 6 feet away from her and she never made any sort of motion in his direction as to do anything? She never made any sort of violent, aggressive movements in his direction to make him even feel that he was in danger. Why would he need to tase her at all? We all saw the video. She made no movements. In fact, he pulled out his gun and approached her as she ducked with her hands up saying, I'm sorry, and shot her in the face, shot her 3 times. What are you talking about, Candace? But let's go.
If he felt that he absolutely had to use his gun, why didn't he shoot her in the foot or somewhere lower? This just did not seem like an appropriate response to me whatsoever.
Appropriate
Now,
response.
parking that aside, of course, as I have said since the beginning of time,
We can get out of
there
this.
are mistakes that police officers are human beings.
So you can very, very much see what I said there, and it certainly does not sound like I was trying to justify what happened.
That didn't sound like you were trying to justify what happened. Police are human beings. So you're telling me that what human beings do is when someone says, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus, they pull out their gun and they point it at that person's face and then they shoot them in the face. Really, Candace?
But what she's taking issue with, and the reason why they clipped me out, was that I, again, made it obvious to Black America, because a lot of Black Americans now watch this podcast and they're starting to see me in my full context, that you can start to.
And that is the point, Candace. A lot of Black Americans are now watching you a lot more, and they get to see the full context. But you got to remember something. They're not stupid. We see the full context, and we understand that you still broker in anti-Blackness. You need to deal with whatever issues you have with your race, because that is serving to undermine the valuable messaging that you try to deliver and that you do deliver. But if you truly have the intention of waking up Black people, you have to truly be independent in the things that you say, in your rhetoric. You cannot be so biased and so anti-Black in your rhetoric, because you are, dear. You are. I'm telling you this as someone who's old enough to be your father. I have a daughter that's around your age. I'm telling you, there's something going on, and I don't know if you're doing this deliberately or if you just don't see it. But you broker in anti-Blackness, which is what actually brings more attention to you, brings you more followers. But unfortunately, what you're doing is you're sanitizing the realities of racism to the detriment of the Black community, which you are a part of.
Just notice this sort of behavior. You'll start to see these trends ahead of an election season. There's going to be a story in which what they want Black people to do is to respond radically, irrationally, to be angry, to turn against each other, to burn down your own neighborhoods. And I said, don't let that be the circumstance. Do not allow people who have big platforms to convince you that this needs to be your issue that you need to go out and scream about. Instead, vote according to things that are going to actually matter.
She's right there. And I said this the moment, we saw Joe Biden announce the whole thing about Sonya Massie and saying, yes, this should never happen, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, they're using this clearly as an opportunity. They're using this for their campaign. We know this. This is what they always do election time. They find a police shooting, and while we can all agree it was egregious, it's horrible, this guy needs to be brought to justice. He is currently being charged with first-degree murder, so that's great. But we know, as I said earlier, how the Democrats weaponize race. So we would be lying to ourselves if we didn't acknowledge that Democrats are using this shooting to their advantage, because we know they are. And what's funny is I was on my Facebook. I logged into my Facebook I think like yesterday. It was like the day after the shooting. And what popped up in my memories? Sandra Bland, which clearly must have happened around the exact same time this year, back then when it happened. So we always know whenever it's election time, there's a new police shooting or some type of an event. And I worry because Democrats are trailing so much. They need something. They need a big event. They need a trump card, so to speak, in order to put them back in the lead, or what they think would be the lead, because I think there's no chance. They don't have any chance against Trump. So what they need is they want a massive event that will throw them into good favor with the rest of the country. And what better than to find some sort of a massive event to trigger Black people to galvanize behind the Democrat Party again. We already see that Black people are not too keen on Kamala Harris. So what's next? I fear there's going to be another mass shooting. I feel like there's going to be some type of a violent act committed against a group of black people by some quote unquote white supremacist group. And, I'm not going to use the language false flag, but you know what I'm talking about.
That's essentially what I said to Black America. And Cardi B then decides to be an example of exactly what I was warning against. Take a listen.
Here we
And
go.
then it's like, okay, he didn't say nothing racial, right? He didn't say nothing like a racial slur and everything. But one thing for sure is that we definitely know that he knew in the back of his head, because she was a black woman, that he was going to get away with it. Not
Okay,
only
let's
did
pause
he
that right
think,
there. So that is a nonsense, right? To say one thing that we definitely know is that he knew in the back of his head that she was a black woman and he was therefore going to get away with it is just such a nonsense, which flies in the face of everything that we have seen since the dawn of BLM. To the contrary, you have police officers that are facing time in prison, like the Asian police officer and the Derek Chauvin, who had nothing to do with anything, who lost his entire life. He was basically new on the scene and happened to be there as they tried to apprehend George Floyd. It's the exact opposite, actually. So the idea that this guy, that we have some shred of proof that this was racially motivated is ridiculous. That is, again, the media trying to convince, and Cardi B getting in line with the media and trying to convince Black people to see a race issue where it is not. And again,
Okay, just how Cardi B said unequivocally this isn't a race issue, how can you now, Candace, say that it unequivocally isn't a race issue? You see, one of the sad advantages of being black in America is that you know when racism undergirds certain decisions and behaviors. Why? Because we have certain lived experiences in this country. And can we say beyond the shadow of a doubt that it was because she was a black woman? No, we can't say that. We know that the guy's been, I think he had like six different jobs in like a couple of years or something like that, 2 years or 4 years. I'm not sure. I heard he had like 2 DUIs. So the guy, and I heard he got hired there after having those DUIs. So I think we have an issue with the culture, with the type of people that they are allowing into these police departments, yes. But to say that race absolutely could not have been a factor, that's disingenuous, and that's just corny. Even with that stupid crack you made about the Asian cop that was there with Derek Chauvin, he has a responsibility as an officer, a responding officer. He saw that George Floyd was in distress, but he did nothing, and he was being a real dick right there at the scene. Also, it doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's these types of arguments that, like I said, they invalidate you. They delegitimize your talking points, because it's like you have this hostility towards blackness. And you know what it is? I guess you don't subscribe to victim mentality, and I think that's great. I don't subscribe to victim mentality, and I teach my children not to do that either, because no one is to blame for your circumstances other than you. You have a responsibility to climb out of those circumstances. When you know better, you do better. So we understand that there is a culture in this country of people wallowing in self-pity and dwelling in their victimhood. But that does not mean that there is no such thing as being a victim when you are black.
and the only reason they're doing this, right? You don't see any example throughout the last 4 years of them since George Floyd really kind of hitting at this, hey, Black America, this shouldn't have happened. You should be angry. The only reason they are doing this is because we're in an election cycle. I am pointing out that because
Agreed.
it is just so obvious. What a ridiculous
Yes,
thing. It is the one thing we definitely know
Yes.
is what was in the back of his head. That's what Cardi B is saying.
Yes.
But let's hear her keep going.
that he was going to get away with it.
All right.
Not only did
Okay. All right. Okay. I don't care anymore. I don't really care about Cardi B. I don't want to even, listen anymore to Candace Owens. Now, the rest of that podcast she did was great. But the thing is, I think the lesson here is this. It's okay to agree with people that you usually disagree with. It's okay to agree with people that you don't even like, because just because you don't like someone doesn't mean that they don't get it right. And so it's okay. Every once in a while, two people who are usually on the opposite side of the spectrum, they find some type of a common interest or common cause. And it's okay to acknowledge that. Don't throw the message out with the messenger, which is something that people tend to do with people like Candace Owens. But at the same time, Candace Owens, you need to understand the responsibility that you have to the truth. Because if you are claiming to be a, a person who purports to speak the truth, if you're saying that you are a steward of the truth, you have a responsibility to that. That means you have to say things that are objectively true, even if it offends your audience, because that's the role of leadership. The role of a leader is to say the things that need to be said, even when it makes your strongest supporters or followers uncomfortable. A leader is willing to stand alone in a room of thousands, all by themselves, as long as you know that you are standing in the truth. And you have to be willing to open yourself up to the truth. Now, one thing I'll give Candace Owens, she is a person who she's open to dialogue. But I think one of the disadvantages of that with Candace is she's a very intelligent person. She's very articulate, but she usually matches herself with people who are not as articulate or not as critically versed or in a certain level of understanding as she has. And so it creates, even though you're having this discourse back and forth with people, you're still creating an echo chamber, because the people that you are debating with and you're conversing with, they're not really intellectually equipped to go against you. And so that builds up this false confidence, this false sense of inflated esteem, where you start to feel like you know everything. And you have to be careful with that, because it then comes off as condescension and hostility. Don't allow your hubris to take over. You have to be humble enough to listen to another view. Don't just, hear it, no, listen to another point of view, absorb the information, and be willing to change your mind after being introduced to new information. If there's ever a weakness that I see with Candace Owens, it is that. She's well read, but at the same time, she's well read in things that support her worldview. You have to be willing to dig into the other information, dig into the other side, the things that you don't agree with, because you might find something in there that might surprise you. Like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't think about that. And now you develop a more nuanced view of life and your politics. There's no such thing as a singular candidate that is right on all the issues. You can agree with Trump, but you're also going to disagree with him on certain things. But what we see in this political environment is people are subscribing to the teams of the left and the right, the Democrats, Republican, and you're just taking everything. You're not using critical analysis with their politics that they're feeding to you through mostly propaganda. You have to do your own research. You have to question. You must question the things that they are telling you, because if you don't question it, you're nothing more than a teleprompter for them. And that's what we're seeing today. And so my one piece of advice to Candace Owens, and I'm saying this with love, when I saw that interview you did with Norm Finkelstein, I watched you transform. I watched your eyes being open. I don't know if it's because you were pregnant and the hormones and the maternal instincts were coming in, but I watched something change in you in that interview, Candace. And what I would love to see is for you to engage in these conversations with people that you don't typically like or agree with, but do it in good faith. I loved to see you and Brianna Joy Gray have that conversation. I thought that was great. I would have loved to see more. I would have loved to see Brianna push back on a couple of other things, because listen, there's a lot I don't agree with Brianna on, but there are a lot of things that I do agree with her on. So I think that's the best way that we can all get further today, is by engaging with each other and having these conversations in front of our audiences. Because when you do it in front of the public, you're now giving them permission to think critically and ask questions and dig deeper and become more informed. That is the purpose of these podcasts. That's the purpose of these conversations. Don't just have these conversations with the famous people either, because at the end of the day, we are appealing to the people on the ground. We're appealing to everyday Joe Schmo and Jane Smith or whoever it is. We're trying to reach out to the public, and we want them to feel like they are involved in the conversation, because for far too long, the American people have been left out of the conversation. I think that we have so many brilliant minds in this ecosphere, this digisphere on the internet, and I would just love to see them start to come together. All these diverse perspectives, but come together with a level of respect and dignity and a willingness to hear each other. Wow, that would really change the world. And so just remember, no matter what side of the aisle that we stand on, even Barack Obama said it. You know, a lot of you guys, Lord and Savior Barack Obama said it. Even enemies need to talk. So just remember, guys,